The hunger had become Helena Dalton's closest companion, gnawing at her insides while she poured the last of the grain into the trough for 3 skeletal horses that had been left in her care when their owner died, owing her father money. It was August 1878 in El Dorado Canyon, Nevada, and the desert heat made everything shimmer like water, including Helena's vision as she steadied herself against the stable door, watching the animals eat what should have been her breakfast, lunch, and likely dinner too. She had been 21 years old for 3 weeks now, though she felt ancient in her bones, worn down by responsibility and loss. Her father had passed 6 months ago from pneumonia, leaving her with a boarding stable, mountains of debt, and a stubborn determination to honor every agreement he had made, even when those agreements meant feeding animals while her own stomach cramped with emptiness. The horses needed to stay healthy if she had any hope of selling them to recoup what was owed, she told herself for the 100th time. They could not afford to lose any more weight. She could. The sun beat down mercilessly as Helena hauled water from the well, her arms trembling with the effort. Sweat soaked through her faded blue work dress, the one she had mended so many times the fabric felt more like a patchwork quilt than a garment. She had sold her better dresses months ago, along with her mother's jewelry, her father's pocket watch, and anything else that might bring a few dollars. The stable was all she had left, and she would be damned if she let it fail. "Easy now," she murmured to the bay mare as she refilled the water bucket. The horse nickered softly, and Helena allowed herself a small smile despite the dizziness that made the world tilt. At least the animals trusted her. At least she was doing something right. She did not hear the rider approach until his shadow fell across the stable entrance. Helena turned, squinting against the harsh light, and saw a tall figure dismounting from a dusty gray horse. The man was broad-shouldered and moved with the easy confidence of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. He wore a worn leather vest over a dark shirt, and his hat was pulled low enough that she could not make out his features clearly. "Help you?" Helena called out, trying to sound more authoritative than she felt. Her voice came out thin and reedy, betraying her weakness. "Heard you board horses," the man said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the hot air. "Looking for a place for my mare. Be in town a few weeks, maybe longer." Helena's heart leaped. A paying customer. She needed this. "Yes, I have space. $2 a week includes feed and water twice daily." The man stepped into the stable, and Helena finally got a good look at him. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features tanned dark by the sun. His eyes were a striking pale gray, almost silver in the dim light of the stable, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. Something about his gaze made her feel exposed, as though he could see straight through to all her desperate secrets. "Name's Graham Chase," he said, extending a hand. "Most folks call me Gray." Helena wiped her palm on her dress before shaking his hand, acutely aware of how rough her skin had become. "Helena Dalton, you can bring your horse in. The stall at the end is available." Gray nodded and went to retrieve his mare, a beautiful dappled gray with intelligent eyes and a gentle temperament. As he led her into the stable, Helena watched the way he moved with the animal, easy and comfortable. He clearly cared for the horse, speaking softly to her as he removed her saddle and blanket. "She's beautiful," Helena said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Named Silver. Had her since she was a foal. She is good company." Gray set the saddle on the rail outside the stall and turned back to Helena. "You run this place yourself?" "I do." Helena lifted her chin, daring him to comment on her youth or her gender or anything else that might suggest she was not capable. But Gray just nodded slowly, his eyes moving around the stable. She saw him taking in the details: the clean stalls, the neatly organized tack, the water buckets filled and ready. She saw him also notice the other 3 horses, their ribs showing despite her best efforts. She saw the exact moment his gaze sharpened, when he looked back at her with those unsettling silver eyes and saw too much. "When did you last eat?" he asked, his voice gone quiet. Helena stiffened. "That's not your concern. You are about to fall over where you stand." It was not a question. Gray took a step closer, and Helena resisted the urge to back away. "Those horses are being fed. You are not." "The horses are my responsibility," Helena said, heat rising in her cheeks. "I'll thank you to mind your own business, Mr. Chase. It is Gray." He studied her for another long moment, then seemed to come to some decision. "I need to get Silver settled and find a room. I will be back in an hour. You will eat something before then." The presumption in his tone sparked anger in Helena's empty belly. "I don't take orders from you or anyone else. Not an order. A request." Gray's expression softened slightly. "Please." Before Helena could formulate a response, he turned and walked out of the stable, leaving her standing there with her arms crossed and her pride stung. Who did he think he was, walking in and making demands? She had been managing just fine on her own, and she certainly did not need some stranger telling her what to do, except she had not been managing fine. She knew it, even if she refused to admit it out loud. The hunger was getting worse, making it harder to work, harder to think. Yesterday she had nearly fainted while mucking out stalls. This morning she had thrown up what little water she had drunk, her stomach rejecting even that small offering. Helena forced herself to finish the afternoon chores, moving slowly and carefully to conserve what little energy she had left. By the time Gray returned, the sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. He came back on foot, carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled like heaven. "I hope you like chicken," he said, setting the bundle on the small table outside the stable office. "The hotel restaurant makes a decent meal." Helena's mouth watered traitorously, but she shook her head. "I can't accept that. I don't take charity." "Good thing this is not charity, then." Gray unwrapped the bundle, revealing roasted chicken, fresh bread, and what looked like green beans. "Call it a welcoming gift or payment for putting up with my questions. Whatever makes you comfortable." "Mr. Chase, I really cannot." Gray. He pulled out 2 plates and started dividing the food. "And yes, you can. The horses can wait another hour for their evening feed. You eat first." Those words struck something deep in Helena's chest. The horses can wait. When had she last put herself before the animals? When had she last considered that her own needs might matter as much as theirs? "I don't understand why you care," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gray looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not pity exactly. Something closer to recognition. "I have been where you are. Not the same circumstances, maybe, but I know what it is like to run yourself into the ground trying to prove something, trying to carry weight that is too heavy for one person alone." Helena felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger. She would not show weakness. But Gray was already pushing a plate toward her, and the smell was overwhelming, and she was so tired of being strong all the time. "1 meal," she heard herself say, "but I'm paying you back, sure." Gray's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "You can pay me back by sitting down before you fall down." Helena sat, her legs grateful for the relief. Gray settled across from her, and for a moment they just looked at each other in the fading light. Then Helena picked up the chicken leg on her plate and took a bite, and the taste exploded across her tongue like fireworks. She had forgotten food could taste like this. She had forgotten the simple pleasure of eating when you were hungry. She tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but her body had other ideas. Before she knew it, she had finished everything on her plate and was eyeing the extra bread Gray had set aside. He pushed it toward her without a word, and she took it gratefully, tearing into it with her teeth. "Thank you," she managed between bites. "Thank you. You are welcome." Gray ate his own meal more slowly, watching her with those steady gray eyes. "How long since you ate a full meal?" Helena had to think about it. 4 days, I think, maybe 5. I had some beans earlier in the week. And before that, does it matter? She finished the bread and set down her plate, already feeling more human than she had in weeks. The food sat heavy and warm in her stomach, and though she felt slightly nauseous from eating so much so quickly, it was a good feeling. A full feeling. "It matters to me," Gray said quietly. "You are killing yourself for those horses. They are not just horses. They are my responsibility. My father made a deal and I am honoring it." Helena met his gaze squarely. "Their owner died 2 months back. He had been planning to pay my father for their board, but he never got the chance. I have been trying to get them healthy enough to sell, to recoup some of what is owed. If I let them starve, they will be worthless. Everything my father worked for will be worthless. And if you starve," Helena looked away, "then I guess the problem solves itself. That is not funny." There was an edge to Gray's voice now, something sharp and almost angry. "You think your father would want this? You think he would want you sacrificing yourself?" "My father would want me to honor his word," Helena shot back, her own anger rising. "He would want me to take care of what he left behind. This stable is all I have. These horses are my only chance at keeping it." Gray was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as though he was chewing over his words carefully. Finally, he said, "How much do you need to pay off the debts and keep the stable running?" "Why?" Helena narrowed her eyes. "You going to offer me a loan? Because I can tell you right now, I have no way to pay it back. Just answer the question." Helena did some quick calculations in her head. $300, maybe a bit more. That would cover what is owed on the horses, the overdue accounts at the feed store, and give me enough cushion to keep operating for a few months while I build up business again. It was an impossible sum. She knew it was an impossible sum. She had been trying to scrape together that money for 6 months and had managed barely $20. Gray nodded slowly, as though she had just confirmed something he had already suspected. "I might have a proposition for you, but we can talk about that tomorrow. Right now, you need to rest." "I still have evening chores," Helena protested, though her body was already betraying her with a deep, bone-weary fatigue. The food had helped, but it had also reminded her body just how exhausted it truly was. "I will handle the evening feed," Gray said, standing up and collecting the empty plates. "You tell me what needs doing and I will do it. You go inside and sleep. I don't need you to, Helena." The way he said her name stopped her cold. There was no anger in it, no frustration. Just a quiet certainty that made her throat tighten. "Let someone help you, just this once. Let me help you." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded that she refuse. But her body was already swaying with exhaustion, and the thought of lying down was so appealing that it hurt. So she found herself nodding, heard herself giving Gray instructions for feeding and watering the horses, watched as he headed into the stable with the easy competence of someone who had done this work 1,000 times before. Helena made her way to the small living quarters attached to the stable, a cramped room with a bed, a washstand, and a few other necessities. She collapsed onto the bed without even removing her boots, and sleep claimed her so quickly she did not have time to worry about whether trusting Gray Chase had been the right decision. She woke to sunlight streaming through the single window and the sound of horses nickering in their stalls. For a moment, Helena lay still, disoriented by the fact that she had slept through the entire night. She could not remember the last time that had happened. Usually, she woke every few hours, anxious about the animals or the debts or the 100 other things that pressed on her mind. Helena sat up slowly, her head clearer than it had been in weeks. Her stomach growled, reminding her of last night's meal, but it was a normal hunger now, not the desperate, gnawing emptiness that had become her constant companion. She pulled on her boots and went outside, blinking in the bright morning light. Gray was already in the stable, mucking out stalls with the easy rhythm of someone who had done this work before. He had removed his vest and rolled up his sleeves, and Helena found herself noticing the way his muscles moved under his shirt. She shook off the thought quickly. This was business, nothing more. "You are still here," she said, announcing her presence. Gray looked up and nodded. "Figured you could use the help. Already fed and watered everyone. That bay mare has a loose shoe, you know. She's going to throw it if someone does not fix it soon." Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had known about the loose shoe but had not had money for a farrier. "I know. I was planning to handle it myself. You know how to shoe a horse. My father taught me." She crossed her arms defensively. "I can manage. I am sure you can." Gray set aside the pitchfork and came to lean against the stall door. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. The strong line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his gray eyes seemed to see right through her careful defenses. "But you do not have to manage alone. I told you last night I had a proposition." "I remember." Helena tried to keep her voice neutral. "What kind of proposition?" "I need a place to stay for the next few months. Got work in the area, and I would rather not be living in a hotel the whole time. I was thinking I could help out around here in exchange for boarding silver and a place to sleep. I am good with horses, can do basic repairs, and I am not afraid of hard work." Helena studied him carefully, looking for the catch. There was always a catch. "What is the real reason you are offering this? What do you mean?" "Men do not just offer to work for free out of the goodness of their hearts, especially not for a woman they do not know. So what is it you really want?" Gray met her gaze steadily. "Honestly, I want to make sure you do not work yourself to death. I watched my mother do that after my father died. She tried to keep our ranch going by herself, refused to ask for help, refused to admit she needed it. By the time I was old enough to really contribute, she had broken herself down so far there was nothing left to save. She died when I was 17, and I have spent every day since wishing I could have done something different, wishing someone had stepped in and made her accept help." The raw honesty in his words made Helena's chest ache. She saw the truth of it in his eyes, the old grief that still lived there. This was not about her at all. This was about the mother he could not save. "I am not your mother," she said gently. "I know that." Gray pushed away from the stall door and crossed his arms, mirroring her posture. "But maybe I can do for you what no one did for her. Maybe that is selfish, but there it is. I am offering to help because I want to, because I can, and because you need it whether you will admit it or not." Helena wanted to refuse. Every independent bone in her body screamed at her to send him away, to prove that she could do this alone. But the practical part of her, the part that had been desperately trying to keep everything afloat for 6 long months, saw the opportunity here. With Gray's help, she could get the stable back on solid footing. She could feed the horses and herself. She could maybe, finally, get ahead instead of constantly falling behind. 3 months, she heard herself say. "You can stay for 3 months, help with the horses and repairs. I will feed you and give you a place to sleep. After 3 months, we renegotiate or you move on. And if at any point I feel like you are trying to take advantage or take over, you leave immediately. This is still my stable." Gray nodded slowly, and there was something that looked like respect in his eyes. "Fair enough. I can work with that." They shook on it, and Helena tried to ignore the way her hand seemed to fit naturally in his, the warmth of his calloused palm against hers. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. She could not afford to let it be anything more. Over the next few weeks, Helena discovered that Gray Chase was a man of his word. He worked from dawn until dusk without complaint, mucking stalls, mending fences, repairing the stable roof where it had started to leak. He was quiet most of the time, content to work in companionable silence, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and considered. He had a dry sense of humor that caught Helena off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it. Most importantly, he made sure she ate. Every day, Gray would return from town with food, always with some excuse. The restaurant had extra. Someone owed him a favor. He had bought too much. Helena stopped arguing after the first week, though she kept a careful tally in her head of everything she owed him. Slowly, gradually, her strength returned. The dizziness faded. The constant exhaustion lifted. She could work a full day without feeling like she might collapse. The horses improved too. With both of them working, they could give the animals better care. The 3 horses that had been so skeletal began to fill out, their coats growing shinier, their eyes brighter. Gray had a talent for working with difficult animals, Helena noticed. The bay mare, who had been skittish and nervous, grew calm under his steady hands. He could gentle a spooked horse with nothing but his voice and his patience. "Where did you learn to do that?" Helena asked one afternoon, watching as Gray worked with a new boarder, a high-strung gelding who had been giving her trouble all morning. "My father," Gray said, his attention still on the horse. "Before he died, he was the best horseman I ever knew. He always said horses were just like people. They need to know they can trust you before they will let you close." Helena thought about that as she watched him work. Trust. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. She realized with a start that she was beginning to trust Gray, not just with the horses but with her secrets, her fears, the parts of herself she usually kept locked away. It was a dangerous thing, that trust. Helena had learned early that depending on people only led to disappointment. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving her father lost and grieving. She had learned to be self-sufficient then, to not burden him with her own needs. When her father died, that lesson had only reinforced itself. She was alone, and alone was safer. Except she was not alone anymore, was she? Gray was there every morning when she woke, already working. He was there every evening, making sure she ate before she fed the horses. He was there in the quiet moments between tasks, a steady presence that made the stable feel less empty. One evening, about a month after Gray had arrived, they sat outside the stable watching the sun set over the desert. The heat of the day was finally breaking and a slight breeze stirred the dust. Gray had made coffee, strong and bitter, and they sipped it in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Helena said finally. "Sure. What is the work you are doing in the area? You said you had a job, but you have never mentioned what it is." Gray was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the horizon. "I am tracking someone, a man who killed my uncle 3 years back. Got word he might be in this area, so I came to look." The words hung heavy in the air. Helena turned to look at Gray, seeing the hard set of his jaw, the way his hands tightened around the coffee cup. "Are you a bounty hunter?" she asked carefully. "Not exactly. There is no bounty on this man, no wanted poster. He is smart, covers his tracks well. But I know what he did, and I know he needs to answer for it, so I have been following his trail, picking up work where I can to keep moving." Helena considered this. "What happens when you find him?" "I turn him over to the law. Let justice be done proper." Gray looked at her then, and there was something fierce in his eyes. "I am not looking for revenge, Helena. I am looking for justice. There is a difference." "Is there?" Helena asked softly. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you have been chasing this man for 3 years. That is a long time to dedicate to justice." Gray's mouth tightened. "My uncle was a good man. He deserved better than to be shot in the back over a poker game. His wife, my aunt, she deserved better than to be left alone with 3 young children and no means of support. So yes, I have been chasing this man for 3 years, and I will chase him for 3 more if that is what it takes." Helena heard the pain beneath the anger, the grief that had hardened into something sharp and unyielding. She understood it. She carried her own griefs, her own angers. "I hope you find him," she said finally. "I hope you get your justice. Thank you." Gray's expression softened slightly. "I know it probably sounds foolish to you, spending so much time on this. It does not sound foolish." Helena set down her coffee cup and pulled her knees up to her chest. "It sounds like loyalty, like love. Those are not foolish things." They sat in silence after that, but it felt different somehow, more intimate, as though they had shared something important and were both still processing what it meant. The next morning, Helena woke to find Gray already gone. His horse was not in her stall, and his bedroll was neatly stored in the corner of the tack room where he had been sleeping. For a moment, panic seized Helena's throat. He had left. He had gotten what he wanted or grown tired of the arrangement, and he had left without even saying goodbye. But then she saw the note, weighted down with a stone on the table outside. Helena picked it up with trembling hands. "Got a lead on my man. Will be back in 3 days, maybe 4. Left money for food in the usual place. Do not skip meals. The horses can wait. Gray." Helena read the note 3 times, relief and something else flooding through her. He had not left. He was coming back. And even in his absence, he was still making sure she ate. She found the money tucked under the loose board in the tack room where Gray had taken to hiding his belongings. $20, more than enough for a week's worth of food and then some. Helena held the bills in her hand, overwhelmed by the gesture. She had not asked for this. She had not expected it. But Gray had thought of it anyway, had made sure she would be taken care of even when he was not there. The next 3 days passed slowly. Helena threw herself into work, trying not to think about how much she missed having Gray around. It was ridiculous, really. She had known him for barely a month. She had survived 21 years without him and 6 months running the stable alone. She did not need him, but she wanted him. That was the truth she was trying very hard not to examine. She wanted his steady presence, his quiet competence, his dry humor. She wanted the way he looked at her like she was capable and strong, not fragile and in need of protection. She wanted the warmth that spread through her chest whenever he smiled. Rare as those smiles were, on the 4th day, Helena was in the stable when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She looked up to see Gray riding in on Silver, and the relief that washed over her was so intense it made her knees weak. He looked tired, dust-covered and worn, but he was alive and whole and here. "Did you eat?" were his first words as he dismounted. Helena laughed, actually laughed and nodded. "Every day. Did you find your man?" "No." Gray's expression was grim as he led Silver into her stall. "The lead was bad. Turns out it was someone else entirely, just happened to match the description. Wild goose chase." "I am sorry," Helena said, and meant it. Gray shrugged, but she could see the disappointment in the set of his shoulders. "It happens. I will find him eventually, or I will not. Either way, life goes on." Helena wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the frustration she heard in his voice, but words felt inadequate. So instead, she did something she had not done since her father died. She reached out and touched Gray's arm, just a brief contact, her hand on his sleeve. "I am glad you came back," she said quietly. Gray looked down at her hand, then up at her face, and something shifted in his expression. His gray eyes softened, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. "I am glad to be back." They stood there for a moment, her hand on his arm, his eyes on her face, and Helena felt something pass between them, an acknowledgement of sorts. A recognition that this arrangement they had made was becoming something else, something neither of them had planned for. Gray cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the contact. "I should get cleaned up. Long ride." "Right. Yes." Helena dropped her hand, feeling foolish and flustered. "I will finish up here." But as Gray walked away toward the pump to wash off the trail dust, Helena found herself smiling. He had come back. Despite his quest, despite having every reason to keep moving, he had come back. To her, to the stable. To this life they were building together, piece by careful piece. Summer burned toward fall, and the stable began to thrive again. Word had spread that Helena Dalton's place was well run and reliable, and boarders trickled in. Nothing overwhelming, but enough to provide steady income. With Gray's help, Helena was able to finally pay off the feed store debt. She sold 2 of the 3 horses she had been caring for, getting fair prices for both. The money went into a tin box she kept hidden under her bed, growing slowly but steadily. She tried to pay Gray for his work, but he refused every time. "We had a deal," he would say. "Room and board for 3 months. I am holding you to it." The 3 months came and went. Neither of them mentioned renegotiating their arrangement. Helena found herself noticing things about Gray that she had not let herself see before. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck when it got too long. The way he hummed tunelessly while he worked, apparently unaware he was doing it. The way his whole face changed on the rare occasions when he truly smiled, not just that small quirk of his mouth, but a full, genuine smile that made her heart skip. She caught herself watching him more often than she should. Noticed the way other women looked at him when they came to the stable. Gray seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on the work, but Helena was not oblivious. She saw the way the widow Morrison lingered when she brought her horse, the way she touched Gray's arm and laughed at things that were not funny. She saw the way the saloon girl, Lily, found excuses to walk past the stable, always when Gray was outside. It made something hot and uncomfortable twist in Helena's stomach. She told herself she had no right to feel that way. Gray was not hers. He was free to pursue anyone he wanted. Their arrangement was business, nothing more. Except it had stopped being just business somewhere along the way, and they both knew it. One evening in late October, a dust storm rolled in suddenly, turning the sky orange and filling the air with grit. Helena and Gray rushed to get all the horses inside and secure the stable doors and windows. They worked quickly, efficiently, moving around each other with the practiced ease of partners who knew each other's rhythms. By the time they finished, the storm was howling outside, wind rattling the stable walls. Helena peered out through a crack in the door and saw nothing but swirling dust. "We are stuck here until this blows over," she said, stating the obvious. Gray nodded, brushing dust from his hair. "Could be hours. These desert storms can last all night." They settled in to wait, sitting on hay bales in the main aisle of the stable. The horses were restless but calm, trusting that the humans would keep them safe. Helena lit a lantern, casting warm light through the space. "Tell me something," Gray said after a while, "something I do not know about you." Helena considered the question. "What do you want to know? Anything. Everything." Gray leaned back against the wall, his eyes on her face. "I have been here 4 months, and I feel like I barely know you. You are always working, always focused on the next task. Who is Helena Dalton when she is not trying to save her father's stable?" The question caught Helena off guard. She could not remember the last time anyone had asked her about herself, about who she was beyond her responsibilities. "I do not know any more," she admitted. I feel like I have been in survival mode for so long I have forgotten what it is like to just be. Then tell me who you were before, Gray suggested. Before your father died, before all of this. Helena closed her eyes, reaching back into memory. I wanted to be a teacher, she said softly. I loved reading, loved learning. My mother taught me before she died, and I taught myself after. My father used to joke that I had read every book in El Dorado Canyon twice. I thought maybe I could go to a city somewhere, get proper training, come back and open a school. Why did you not? My father needed me here. And then he got sick, and then he died, and suddenly teaching seemed like a foolish dream. The stable was real. The debts were real. Dreams could wait. Dreams should not have to wait, Gray said quietly. What is the point of surviving if you never get to live? Helena opened her eyes and looked at him. Is that why you have been chasing your uncle's killer for 3 years? Because you are living instead of just surviving. The words came out sharper than she intended, but Gray did not flinch. Fair point, he acknowledged. Maybe we are both running from something, me from grief, you from yourself. I am not running from anything, Helena protested. Are you not? Gray leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. You work yourself into exhaustion. You refuse help until you are literally starving. You keep everyone at arm's length. That sounds like running to me. And what about you? Helena shot back, stung by the accuracy of his words. You drift from place to place, never putting down roots, dedicating your life to tracking one man. Is that not running too? It is, Gray admitted. I have been running since my mother died. Running from the guilt, from the grief, from the fear that I am not enough to make a difference. I thought if I could find my uncle's killer, if I could see justice done, maybe it would fill that hole. But lately I have been wondering if I am just making the hole bigger, if I am missing life while I chase death. The raw honesty in his words made Helena's throat tight. She saw herself reflected in what he was saying, saw the ways they were both trapped by their pasts, their griefs, their stubborn determination to prove something that maybe did not need proving. What changed? She asked. What made you start wondering? Gray looked at her for a long moment, and Helena saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. You did. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs, and she could not seem to look away from Gray's face, from the vulnerability she saw there. Gray, she whispered, not sure if it was a protest or a plea. I know, he said. I know this complicates things. I know I should probably keep my mouth shut. But Helena, these past 4 months with you have been the first time in 3 years that I have felt like I was living instead of just existing. You make me want to stop running. You make me want to stay. Helena wanted to speak, but no words came. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding, every carefully constructed wall she had built around herself crumbling under the weight of Gray's confession. You do not have to say anything, Gray continued. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that when I look at you, I do not see someone who needs saving. I see someone extraordinary, someone strong and stubborn and brave enough to keep fighting even when the whole world seems stacked against her. I see someone I could. He trailed off, then finished quietly, someone I am falling in love with. The world seemed to stop. Helena stared at Gray, at this man who had walked into her life 4 months ago and somehow become essential to it. She thought about the way he made sure she ate. The way he worked beside her without complaint, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon, the way her heart lifted every time she saw him, the way she felt steadier, stronger, more herself when he was near. I am scared, she whispered. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of what it means to let someone in. Helena wrapped her arms around herself. I have spent so long being alone, being self-sufficient. What if I let myself lean on you and you leave? What if I let myself care and you break my heart? Gray stood up and crossed to where Helena sat. He knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her arms. I cannot promise I will never hurt you. I cannot promise everything will be perfect. But Helena, I can promise that I am not going anywhere. I can promise that if you let me, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust. I can promise that you will never have to choose between feeding yourself and feeding the horses again, because I will make sure both are taken care of. And I can promise that my feelings for you are real and true and not going away. Helena looked into his gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, should protect herself, should keep her walls up. And then she thought about what Gray had said earlier. What is the point of surviving if you never get to live? I am falling in love with you too, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude or loneliness or anything else. But Gray, when you were gone those 4 days, I missed you so much it hurt. When you came back, I felt like I could breathe again. I do not know what that means or where it goes, but I know I do not want to keep pretending I do not feel it. Gray's face transformed, that rare, genuine smile breaking across his features like sunrise. Say it again, he said. What? That you are falling in love with me. Say it again. Helena felt her own smile tugging at her lips. I am falling in love with you, Graham Chase. Gray, he corrected, but he was still smiling, and then he was leaning forward, and Helena was leaning forward too, and their lips met in the middle. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Gray's hands came up to cup Helena's face, and she gripped his shoulders, and the kiss deepened into something that stole her breath and made her head spin. She had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this combination of tenderness and passion, never with the feeling that she was falling and being caught all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Gray rested his forehead against Helena's. I have wanted to do that for months, he admitted. Why did you not? Because I was trying to be honorable, trying to give you space and time and not pressure you. It was killing me. Helena laughed, the sound bright and surprised. When was the last time she had laughed like that? When was the last time she had felt this light, this happy? You are an idiot, she said fondly. Probably, Gray agreed. He kissed her again, soft and sweet, then pulled back. We should talk about what this means, about us. Helena nodded, though part of her just wanted to keep kissing him and forget about talking. But Gray was right. They needed to figure this out. What about your search? She asked. What about finding your uncle's killer? Gray was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her cheek. I have been thinking about that, he said finally. For 3 years, that search has been my whole life. But lately, I have been realizing that my uncle would not want this for me. He would not want me to spend my life chasing shadows while missing out on real happiness. He was all about family, about building a life worth living. I think if he could see me now, he would tell me to let go. To let the law handle it and focus on my own life. Are you sure? Helena asked. I do not want to be the reason you give up on something important to you. You are not making me give up anything. You are helping me see what really matters. Gray kissed her forehead. If the killer crosses my path, if I get solid information, I will act on it. But I am not going to keep drifting, keep running, keep putting my life on hold. Not anymore. Not when I have something real right here worth staying for. Helena felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. She leaned into Gray's touch, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. So you are staying. For real, if you will have me, I am staying. Gray's smile was soft and genuine. We can figure out the details as we go. But Helena, I am not leaving you. Not unless you tell me to go. Then I guess you are stuck with me, Helena said, smiling through her tears. They stayed in the stable until the dust storm passed, talking and kissing and making plans. Gray told her about his childhood on the ranch, about his parents and the life they had built before tragedy struck. Helena told him about her mother, about the books she loved, about the dreams she had set aside. They shared their griefs and their hopes, their fears and their joys, weaving their stories together into something new. By the time the storm cleared and the stars emerged in the clean, washed sky, Helena felt like she had known Gray her entire life. Like he had always been meant to be here beside her, helping her shoulder the burdens she had been carrying alone for so long. Over the next few weeks, everything seemed to click into place. The stable continued to grow, bringing in enough income that Helena could start saving properly. Gray proved to be not just a capable hand but an actual partner, making decisions with her, offering ideas she had not considered. He never tried to take over or undermine her authority, but he made it clear he was invested in their shared success. They worked side by side during the days and spent their evenings talking or simply existing in comfortable silence. Gray would read aloud to Helena while she mended tack, his voice turning her beloved books into something even more magical. Helena would tell him stories about the horses and their owners, about the town's history, about anything and everything that came to mind. And they kissed. Lord, did they kiss! Every chance they got, stealing moments in the stable or sitting together under the stars. Helena had never known physical affection could be like this, could make her feel so alive, so present in her own skin. Gray was always gentle, always respectful, but there was a hunger in his kisses that matched her own, a promise of more when they were ready. Winter came to the desert, bringing cold nights and clear, brilliant days. Helena and Gray worked together to winterize the stable, ensuring all the horses would be warm and comfortable. They took on more boarders, capitalizing on the fact that many people needed winter stabling for their animals. On a particularly cold December evening, Gray found Helena in the stable office, going over the books by lantern light. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You look happy," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. Helena leaned back into his embrace, marveling at how natural this had become. "I am happy. Look at these numbers, Gray. We are actually making a profit, a real profit. For the first time since my father died, I feel like we are not just surviving, we are thriving." "We," Gray repeated, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I like that word. Me too." Helena turned in his arms to face him. "Gray, I have been thinking about us, about the future." "What about it? I want you to be my partner, officially. Not just someone who helps out, but an actual partner in the business. We split everything 50-50, make all decisions together. This place is as much yours now as it is mine." Gray pulled back slightly, his expression serious. "Helena, you do not have to do that. This stable is your inheritance, your father's legacy. I know you do not expect anything. That is why I want to do it." Helena reached up to touch his face. "Gray, you saved this place. You saved me. Without you, I would have lost everything. And more than that, you have become home to me. I do not want to imagine my life without you in it. So please say yes, be my partner in every way." Gray searched her eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "On one condition." "What?" "Marry me." Helena's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me," Gray repeated, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it is fast. I know we have only been together a few months. But Helena, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real life. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to raise horses and maybe someday children. I want everything with you. So marry me, please." Helena felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling, laughing, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Gray let out a whoop of joy and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and joy and promise into that single kiss. "I do not have a ring yet," he admitted when they finally broke apart, "but I will get you one, the best one I can afford." "I do not need a ring," Helena said, though she was already imagining what it might look like. "I just need you." "You have me," Gray promised. "For as long as I am breathing, you have me." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in town. Helena wore a new dress, the first she had bought for herself in over a year, pale blue cotton that made her eyes look even greener. Gray wore his best shirt and pants, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. He had gotten her a ring after all, a simple gold band that fit perfectly on her finger. The ceremony was brief but beautiful. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gray kissed Helena like she was the most precious thing in the world. Looking into his eyes, Helena saw her whole future reflected back at her, and it was brighter than anything she could have imagined alone. The wedding was attended by a handful of townspeople who had become friends over the past months. The widow Morrison was there, looking disappointed but gracious. Lily from the saloon gave Helena a knowing smile and pressed a bottle of champagne into her hands with a wink. The feed store owner shook Gray's hand vigorously, clearly pleased to see Helena settled with a good man. After the ceremony, they returned to the stable, which was now officially Chase Stable according to the new sign Gray had commissioned. Helena Dalton was now Helena Chase, a name that felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. That night, after all the horses were settled and the world was quiet, Gray carried Helena over the threshold of their living quarters. He had spent the past week fixing it up, adding a proper bed frame, hanging curtains, making it feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. He set her down gently and just looked at her, his expression full of wonder. "My wife," he said softly, testing out the word. "My husband," Helena replied, and then they were kissing again, and there were no more words needed. The months that followed were the happiest of Helena's life. She and Gray fell into an easy partnership, both in the business and in their marriage. They worked hard during the days and retreated into their small home in the evenings, learning each other in ways both profound and simple. Gray learned that Helena liked her coffee with a little sugar, that she hummed while she worked just like he did, that she had a terrible temper when provoked but forgave quickly. Helena learned that Gray was an early riser who loved watching the sunrise, that he had a surprising sweet tooth, that he sometimes woke from nightmares about his mother but always calmed when she held him. They learned each other's bodies too, with patience and tenderness and growing passion. Helena had been nervous that first night, uncertain of what to expect, but Gray had been so gentle, so attentive that her fears melted away. He made her feel beautiful and wanted and safe, and she tried to give him the same in return. By spring, the stable was thriving beyond Helena's wildest dreams. They had a waiting list for boarding spaces and had to turn away potential clients. Gray suggested expanding, building additional stalls, and Helena agreed. They used their savings to hire carpenters, and within 2 months they had doubled their capacity. It was around that time that Helena started feeling ill. At first, she thought it was just exhaustion from all the work, but when the nausea persisted and her monthly bleeding did not come, she began to suspect the truth. She waited another week to be sure, then told Gray one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. "I think I am pregnant," she said, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Gray went very still. You think, I am pretty sure. All the signs are there. Helena looked at him, trying to gauge his reaction. I know we did not plan this. I know it is soon. If you are not ready, not ready. Gray interrupted, and she saw that his eyes were wet. Helena, are you joking? This is the best news I have ever gotten. We are going to have a baby. A baby. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and Helena felt her own tears falling. She had not realized how worried she had been about his reaction until relief flooded through her. You are happy? She asked, needing to hear it. I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely stand it. Gray pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. We are going to be parents, Helena. We are going to have a family. The pregnancy was not easy. Helena struggled with sickness for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Gray hovered anxiously, trying to help but often just getting in the way. Helena found his concern endearing even when it was frustrating. He made her rest when she wanted to work, brought her plain crackers and ginger tea, rubbed her feet when they swelled. As her belly grew, they made plans for the future. They converted the small storage room attached to their living quarters into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from scratch. Gray proved to be surprisingly handy at woodworking, crafting a beautiful piece that would rock their baby to sleep. Helena continued working as long as she could, but by her 7th month, Gray finally put his foot down. You are not mucking stalls anymore, he declared. I will handle the heavy work. You can do the books and feed the horses, but that is it. Helena wanted to argue, but her back was aching and her feet were swollen, and the idea of not having to shovel manure was too appealing to refuse. Fine, she grumbled, but I am still in charge. Yes, madam, Gray said with that small smile she loved. He kissed her rounded belly. Your mama is stubborn. I hope you get that from her. In October of 1879, almost exactly a year after Gray had proposed, Helena went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Gray looked so terrified that Helena almost laughed despite the pain. But finally, after nearly 20 hours, their son was born. They named him Thomas Graham Chase, after Gray's father. He had a head full of dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and when Gray held him for the first time, Helena saw her strong, capable husband break down in tears. He is perfect, Gray whispered, staring at his son with awe. Helena, look what we made. He is perfect. Helena, exhausted and sore but happier than she had ever been, smiled. He looks like you. Poor kid, Gray joked, but his voice was choked with emotion. He carefully placed Thomas in Helena's arms, and they sat together as a family for the first time, marveling at the tiny life they had created. The first year of Thomas's life was chaotic but wonderful. He was a fussy baby, prone to crying at all hours, but he was also curious and alert, tracking movement with those sharp gray eyes. Gray was an attentive father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Thomas when he would not sleep. Helena had worried that the baby would interfere with their work, but they managed to adapt, taking turns caring for him while the other handled stable duties. The town of El Dorado Canyon had grown around them, becoming more established and prosperous. The silver mines were producing well, bringing in workers and their families. Chase Stable benefited from the growth, as more people meant more horses that needed boarding. When Thomas was 2, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Gray was prepared for the announcement. Boy or girl? He asked immediately. I do not know yet, Helena laughed. Give me a few months to figure that out. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, an easier birth than Thomas had been. They named her Rose Elizabeth Chase after Helena's mother. Rose had Helena's green eyes and a disposition far sunnier than her brother's. She smiled early and often, charming everyone who met her. With 2 young children, life became even more hectic. But Gray and Helena had built something solid, something that could weather the storms. The stable was successful enough that they hired a young man named Peter to help with the daily work, giving them more time with their children. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses just as much as his parents did. By the time he was 5, he was helping with simple chores, his small hands carefully measuring out feed under Gray's watchful eye. Rose was more adventurous, always getting into things she should not, keeping Helena on her toes. One evening, when Thomas was 6 and Rose was 4, the family sat together after dinner. Gray held Rose on his lap while Thomas leaned against Helena's side. They were looking at a book together, Helena reading aloud while Gray made Rose giggle by tickling her feet. Helena paused in her reading and just looked at her family. Her husband, still as handsome as the day they met, now with a few strands of silver in his dark hair. Her children, healthy and happy and loved. Her home, warm and secure. The stable outside, thriving under their care. "What are you thinking?" Gray asked, noticing her silence. "I am thinking about the day you walked into my life," Helena said softly. "I was starving, desperate, convinced I had to do everything alone. And then you said those words that changed everything. The horses can wait." Gray's expression softened with memory. "You looked ready to collapse but still determined to feed those animals before yourself." "Because I did not think I mattered as much as they did," Helena admitted. "I had forgotten how to take care of myself, how to let anyone take care of me. And now—" Gray prompted. Helena smiled, looking around at her family. "Now I know that taking care of myself, letting you help me, was not weakness, it was strength. It gave me the foundation to build all of this, to build us." "I love you," Gray said simply. "Then and now and always. I love you too." Helena leaned over to kiss him, careful not to disturb Rose, who had fallen asleep in his arms. "Thank you for making me eat first. Thank you for showing me that I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Gray corrected gently. "I just gave you a little push in the right direction." That night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in bed, Helena thought about how far they had come. From 2 broken people trying to outrun their grief to a family, solid and real and full of love. She thought about the stable, once failing and now flourishing. She thought about the future, about watching Thomas and Rose grow, about growing old with Gray by her side. "What are you thinking about now?" Gray murmured, his arm around her waist. "Happy endings," Helena said. "I used to think those were just in books. Fairy tales that did not happen to real people. And now I know better." She turned in his arms to face him. "Now I know that happy endings are real. They just take work and patience and finding the right person to build them with." Gray kissed her forehead. "I am glad I am your right person." "Me too," Helena whispered. "Me too." Years passed, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a tall, capable young man who took naturally to the family business. Rose developed a love of books just like her mother and often talked about becoming a teacher. Gray's hair went fully silver, and Helena found laugh lines forming around her eyes, evidence of countless happy moments. Chase Stable became one of the most respected in the region. They had expanded twice more, now employing 3 full-time hands and boarding over 30 horses at any given time. Gray had a particular talent for training difficult animals, and people came from miles around seeking his expertise. Helena had eventually fulfilled her old dream in a way she had not expected. She started teaching Rose and Thomas, then began taking on other children in town whose parents wanted them educated, but could not afford to send them away to school. It started with just a few hours a week, but grew into a proper little school that she ran out of a building Gray had built for her near the stable. On their 10th anniversary, Gray surprised Helena with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had left El Dorado Canyon in years, and they spent a glorious week exploring the city, eating at restaurants and visiting bookshops. Helena bought so many books they had to ship them home separately. "You are going to need a bigger classroom," Gray teased as they packed for the return journey. "Probably," Helena agreed happily. "But think of all the children who will benefit from these books, all the minds we can open." Gray pulled her close. "You are an amazing woman, Helena Chase." "Have I told you that lately?" "Not in the last hour," Helena said, smiling against his chest. "Better remedy that." So he did, with words and kisses and the kind of love that had only deepened over the years. When they returned home, Thomas and Rose ran out to greet them, both talking over each other about everything that had happened while they were gone. Peter had managed the stable perfectly in their absence, proving that they had built something that could run without their constant oversight. That night, standing outside under the stars with Gray's hand in hers, Helena marveled at the life they had created. "Do you ever think about that dust storm?" she asked. "When you told me you were falling in love with me, all the time," Gray admitted. "That was the night everything changed. The night I let myself admit what I had been feeling for months. I was so scared," Helena remembered, "so convinced that letting myself love you would end in disaster." "And was it a disaster?" Gray asked, amusement in his voice. "The best disaster I ever survived," Helena said, and they both laughed. More years passed. Thomas married a sweet young woman named Sarah, and they had 2 children of their own, a boy and a girl who brought even more joy into the Chase family. Rose eventually did become a teacher, taking over Helena's small school and expanding it further. She married a doctor who came to El Dorado Canyon to set up a practice, and they had 3 children who kept everyone busy. Gray and Helena became grandparents, a role they embraced with enthusiasm. Gray taught his grandchildren to ride and care for horses, just as he had taught Thomas and Rose. Helena read to them from her extensive collection of books, passing on her love of stories to another generation. They had built something that would outlast them, Helena realized. Not just the stable or the school, but a legacy of love and hard work and taking care of each other. They had shown their children and grandchildren what it meant to be partners, to face challenges together, to never give up on each other. On a warm evening in the summer of 1898, Gray and Helena sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They were in their 60s now, moving a bit slower but still healthy and active. Thomas ran the stable with his usual competence, but Gray still helped out most days, unable to stay away from the horses he loved. 20 years, Helena said softly. "It has been 20 years since we got married, more than that since the day you walked into my life." "Best decision I ever made," Gray said, squeezing her hand. "Stopping here, staying with you. What do you think would have happened if you had not stopped, if you had kept chasing your uncle's killer?" Helena asked. Gray was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think I would have wasted my life. I would have spent years pursuing something that was ultimately empty, and I would have missed out on everything that actually mattered. I would have missed out on you, on our children, on this life we built. I would have ended up old and alone with nothing but regrets." "Did you ever find out what happened to him?" "The man you were looking for, actually. Yes, got a letter about 5 years back from a marshal in Arizona. The man was killed in a shootout with lawmen after robbing a bank. Justice caught up with him eventually, just like I always knew it would." Gray turned to look at Helena. "By then I had long since stopped caring. He was just a name from my past, not the thing that defined my future. Helena leaned her head on Gray's shoulder, comfortable and content. I am glad you let it go. I am glad you chose us instead. I will always choose us, Gray said, kissing the top of her head. Every single time. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to emerge. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Thomas and Sarah putting their children to bed, Rose and her husband arriving for dinner, grandchildren laughing and playing. You remember what you said to me that first day? Helena asked. About your mother. About wishing someone had stepped in and made her accept help. I remember. You did that for me. You stepped in. You made me see that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom, and in doing so you saved my life. Not just literally, though you did that too. But you saved me from a life of loneliness and struggle. You gave me joy I never thought I would have. Gray turned to face her fully, his gray eyes still as sharp and bright as they had been 20 years ago. And you saved me right back. You gave me a reason to stop running. You showed me what it meant to build instead of chase. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. We saved each other, Helena. That is what love does. Helena felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears. She had cried so many happy tears over the years, more than she had ever cried sad ones. I love you, Graham Chase. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is good, Gray said, his voice thick with emotion. Because I am planning on a lot of tomorrows with you. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Inside, someone called them for dinner and they stood together, hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family. As they walked inside, Helena glanced back at the stable, at the sign that read Chase Stable in proud letters. She thought about the scared, desperate young woman she had been, starving herself to feed horses because she thought they mattered more than she did. She thought about the cowboy who had walked into her life and changed everything with a simple act of kindness and a few powerful words. The horses can wait. Those words had saved her life. They had taught her that she was worth caring for, worth feeding, worth loving. They had opened the door to everything that came after. The love, the marriage, the children, the grandchildren, the beautiful, messy, wonderful life they had built together. Helena squeezed Gray's hand as they crossed the threshold into their home, into the warmth and light and love that waited there. She had survived starvation and grief and despair. She had fought to save her father's legacy and ended up building something even greater. She had found love when she least expected it and held on to it with everything she had. The stable was thriving. Her children were happy. Her grandchildren were healthy. Her husband still looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. And Helena, who had once thought she was destined to struggle through life alone, had discovered that the greatest strength was not in doing everything yourself, but in letting others help shoulder the load. As they sat down to dinner surrounded by family, Gray caught her eye across the table and smiled. That private, knowing smile that was just for her. Helena smiled back, her heart full to bursting with gratitude and joy. She had been starving once. Starving for food, for hope, for connection, for love. But Gray had fed her in every way that mattered. He had nourished not just her body but her soul, helping her grow into the woman she was meant to be, and in return, she had fed him too. Had given him the home and purpose he had been searching for, had loved him with everything she had and watched him flourish under that love. They had saved each other. They had chosen each other. Every single day for over 20 years, they had woken up and chosen each other again. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Gray and Helena lay in bed together. Gray's arm was around her waist, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me again," she murmured sleepily. "Tell you what?" Gray asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me about the horses." Gray chuckled, knowing exactly what she meant. It had become a tradition over the years, something they did on anniversaries or when they needed to remember how far they had come. "The horses can wait," he said softly, repeating those words from so long ago. "You eat first. You matter more than anything else. You are worth caring for, worth protecting, worth loving with everything I have. You come first, Helena, always." Helena smiled in the darkness, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and valued and cherished. She had come so far from that desperate young woman feeding animals while she starved. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, and she had done it with the man who had seen her worth even when she could not see it herself. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Gray replied. "Now and forever." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built. Outside, the desert night was quiet and peaceful. The stable was secure, the horses well cared for and content. Their children and grandchildren were safe in their own homes, carrying forward the lessons of love and partnership they had learned. Helena Chase, formerly Dalton, had once thought survival was enough. She had thought that keeping her head above water, maintaining her father's legacy, and making it through each day was the best she could hope for. But Gray had shown her that life could be so much more than mere survival. It could be beautiful and joyful and full of love. The horses had waited. She had eaten first, and in that simple act of putting herself first for once, she had opened the door to everything that mattered. She had found love and partnership and family. She had found home, and that, Helena thought as sleep claimed her, was the best happy ending anyone could ask for. Not perfect, not without struggles, but real and earned and absolutely worth every moment of the journey. They had started as two broken people trying to survive their pasts and had become a family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. The horses could wait. Love could not. And in choosing love and choosing each other, Gray and Helena Chase had found everything they had been searching for and so much more. They had found forever, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream.